When I first stumbled into watch-related videos on YouTube, I started to watch videos from a number of content creators, and one of the first watch videos I ever saw related to asking the question, what sort of watch collector are you? And it was an interesting question for me because it's not something that I'd considered before. I started then asking myself that question, like, am I a collector of watches? What am I trying to achieve? But not long after that, as I started to get into this sort of hobby, I started to think that that perhaps was a bit of a silly question because I don't need to know what sort of watch collector I am, or why do I need to put myself into a box, maybe even a watch box, but why do I need to put boundaries on the watches that I'm buying? I thought perhaps this could just evolve and I'll buy watches that I like. But now we skip forward a number of years and I've started to revisit that question, and I've started to realize that it is actually a very, very important question. Hello, you're watching James. My name is James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches. And I talk about something regularly because I find it interesting, but also really important. And that is talking about things that help me make better watch purchasing decisions. The better decisions I make when buying each individual watch, the better for me, the better for my collection, the better use of my money. So understanding what my personal tastes are, understanding why certain watches stay in my collection long term versus watches that come in and then leave fairly quickly is important to me. And I've realized recently that understanding what sort of collection I'm sort of putting together is part of that sort of puzzle, part of learning about my own interests, a part of helping me sort of buy better watches, a part of the reason why certain watches stay in my collection and remain there versus others that do leave. And when I first started to think about this idea of what collection do I have, I wasn't sure. And I kind of then dismissed this because I thought initially perhaps it didn't really matter. But more recently, I have been staring at my own personal collection and really starting to ask myself the question, what is it that I'm trying to sort of put together here? Now, I am very, very aware that it doesn't matter even if I figure that out, because it is going to change, it is going to evolve, watches are going to come and go. The collection could change from one complete type to a completely different type, and I'm okay with that and I'm aware of this, but I think having an understanding of what I'm trying to achieve will help me on this process of collecting watches. And as I looked at my watch collection and as I thought about the collections I've had in the past and how it's evolved, I started to think of different types of collections that I was sort of working towards, or I thought I was working towards. Initially, when I started sort of collecting watches and watching these videos, I thought perhaps I was a one brand collector. Not that I'd have every watch being one brand without any others, but there'd be a majority of one brand. And that was because at the start of this sort of journey, I had lots of Seikos. And I love Seiko. I loved Seikos then and I love Seikos now. So I thought, oh, maybe I'm a Seiko collector with maybe a couple of other watches in my collection. I then started buying some Hamiltons, and then I remember thinking, wow, maybe I'm actually a Hamilton collector. But as it's turned out, as my collection has gone on, I've sort of not gone towards a one brand thing. It's not a specific sort of thing that I've tried to either get or not get. It's just what has evolved in my own collection. So I'm definitely not a one brand collector. The idea of then having a watch from all the different categories made a lot of sense to me. Have a field watch, have a dive watch, have a pilot watch, have a chronograph, have a vintage watch, have a fun watch. Having all these different styles and variations in the collection made a lot of sense to me. And I thought maybe that's the type of collector that I was. But as it turns out, I don't think it is, because there's certain spots in the one of each category that I can't seem to fill. For me, especially, that is field watches. I like the idea of field watches. I've owned many field watches. They're nice watches, but I don't seem to connect with them. So that spot for field watch seems to remain empty and is being filled up with other watches. Because I have a few dive watches, I have a couple of pilot watches, and I have another variety of watches. So there is not a one watch for every category. That's not the sort of collector that I am, but I kind of get that sort of collector. I think that makes sense to me. And that sort of is sort of the next part about this one, or the other sort of collection I was thinking of was having watch for each circumstance in my lifestyle. Having one dress watch because I don't get dressed up that often, but having one available, great. I do more sort of everyday stuff, which really sort of works for me towards sort of dive watches and everyday watches and garter watches. But as it turns out, when I look at my collection today, that's not quite what my collection is either. And looking at my collection and thinking about the way I buy watches, the way I collect watches, I'm certainly not an investor. I'm not investing in watches for the purpose of making money. I'm not that sort of watch collector, but I'm aware that that is a type of collector that is out there. I did think for a while there that I was almost the opposite of that. I thought perhaps I'm an affordable watch collector. I'm going to stick to the budget watches, try and find the best watches at the best prices. And I thought, yes, that's me because, well, that's what I can afford. And there are some incredible watches at low prices. As it turns out, that's not exactly what has happened, because even though I love affordable watches and I'm always going to have affordable watches in my collection, I know now that there are some watches in my collection that are definitely not affordable. I don't have any super high-end, super luxury expensive watches. I don't intend to buy any of them anytime soon, but I seem to have a range of prices of watches. And for me, perhaps that's because my own personal budget has changed. Perhaps I've become a little bit numb to the idea of spending certain amounts of money on watches, but I've realized no matter what the reason is, I'm not a purely affordable watch collector either. So as I look at my collection today, as I think about the kind of watches that I'm thinking about adding to the collection, I can't seem to categorize it into one of those fields. I can't come up with a category that fits me perfectly about what I am trying to collect. I seem to be a bit of a mix of a few things, and I think that is probably pretty normal for most people. But having an awareness of that, I think, is important. And also understanding why the specific watches are in my collection. So this is the type of collector I think I am. I think I am a bit of a mix of having one of each sort of style. I like having a variety of watches. I also like having watches that I actually wear, so watches that suit my lifestyle. So there's a bit of multi-categories. There is a bit of what I like to wear, but there is a main category that is what every watch that remains in my collection fits into. And that is watches that really, really resonate with me. Watches that I really, really love. The watches that stay in my collection that remain as part of my core collection are watches that I just adore. Watches that I pick up and I can certainly say, as of this moment anyway, I'm never going to sell this watch. That may change. I've done this with watches before, but this is the collection that I think I'm building. A variety of watches for different styles, different brands, different looks, but mostly watches that I just love. Love collections. I don't know. Is that a collection? Is that a particular form of collection? It's probably what we should all be trying to achieve, just buying watches that we love. But this is almost next level love. You know, there are other watches that I've purchased that I really like and I really enjoy, but they do end up being sold. The ones that remain are these extra special watches that I have these connections with. And that's what I'm trying to buy now. I'm trying to look for watches that I have the same connection with. So my collection of watches will all have that connection with me. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's been a bit of a strange one, and I've been trying to think about it from a slightly different perspective. And specifically, I'm trying to figure out what I've been trying to buy and make some better buying decisions for me. Let me know what you sort of think you're collecting. Are you going for a category or are you just buying what you like? It'd be interesting to hear from you. And whilst you do that, you can possibly maybe check some other of my videos out.